Next, we have another one we're going to talk a lot about. Citadel by Kieran Foy, who directed the universally panned Sinister 2 and 2 episodes of The Haunting of Bly Manor.
Oh.
Yeah, which there's not an episode of Bly Manor that I dislike. So.
Yeah. At least he has a win.
Yeah. We'll give him that. Sinister 2, though, bro. An agoraphobic father teams up with a renegade priest to save his daughter from the clutches of a gang of twisted, feral children who committed an act of violence against his family years earlier. Okay. Truly, who doesn't hate teenagers? Even teenagers hate other teenagers. Parents warn about the troubled teens. Teachers approach high schools like prison wardens. Every generation's societal ills are blamed on that generation's youth. Citadel asks the brave questions asked by countless out-of-touch grown adults before. What if those youths were actual monsters? An entry into the hoodie horror genre popular in British 2000s horror. Usually these films pretty much exist just to malign the urban working class, especially urban working class youth. While it would be nice to just take a piece of media at face value and enjoy it for what it is, extant from politics and real-world going-ons, unfortunately, we live in a world where teenagers, especially black and brown teenagers, have been killed for the crime of wearing a hoodie. So a genre of film which really only impresses upon its audience that disenfranchised teenage boys wearing hoodies are evil and scary, seem to support the real-life demonization of these kids, whether the filmmakers really mean to or not. Citadel is a bit of an outlier, though not nearly as much of an outlier as the masterpiece Attack the Block, in that its writer-director Kieran Foy was himself a working-class teenager when he was beaten brutally with a hammer by a gang of behooded youths, which left him, alongside his physical wounds, with a debilitating case of agoraphobia. That incident formed the basis for Citadel, and indeed it's probably his own experience that helps Citadel to avoid many of the usual pitfalls of hoodie horror. For instance, the protagonist is also working class, also living in the council estates haunted by the hoodie gangs. Unlike in most hoodie horror where the protagonists are middle or upper class, the film is peppered with moments where other people try to reassure our protagonist Tommy that he's not like other poor people. But when he looks and acts like his junky neighbors the council is so quick to demonize, even donning a hoodie himself, it's difficult for us to believe them. Even Tommy aligns himself more with his hated neighbors, reminding the priest he used to live in the very tower that's now condemned. The priest is hoodie horror personified, frothing at the mouth to murder every hooded youth in the city, reminding Tommy again and again that they aren't human and they can't be saved, only to reveal that it was his callous abandonment of his own children which first began the fear-breeding plague, in direct opposition to Tommy's role as a father desperate to save children, both his own daughter and Danny, a little boy rescued from a hoodied fate, despite Tommy's own trauma. The film's message does become a bit muddled with the death of Marie, who spends the whole film vocalizing the truth of the matter, that these hoodie gangs are mostly disenfranchised kids abandoned by the system and society at large and then demonized by them, only for her to then be killed by them. It can maybe, along with the cartoonish opening scene of Tommy's pregnant wife being beaten and stabbed with a mysterious needle, be seen as an acknowledgement that often, like Foy himself, the victims of violent urban crime are other disenfranchised people themselves, their neighbors, classmates, locals. I understand the fear that comes from living someplace like that. My hometown was the capital of violent crime for my state when I lived there. Even things like the used needles Tommy is petrified of and keeps stumbling upon, my friends and I stumbled upon a few of those during our time at the public park, and it was all too easy as a kid with a bad home life to turn to any and everything to kill the boredom and release the stresses and rage and fear that built and built up at home. That's where my real confliction with this film lies, that I understand its foundation all too well. The critique of a system too quick to abandon anyone who falls through the cracks, of a public whose disinterest or outright disdain allows it to fester. I just wish it had managed to relay them a bit better. This is a very blue film, and Aneurin Bernard convincingly plays a waifish, neurotic young father in over his head. The whole film is ERP for you, baby. Oluwunmi Mosaku also plays a breath of fresh air, hospice nurse, and his only real friend, though I was disappointed when she seemed to have feelings for this shivering reed of a man. What, like she can't resist his fear sweat? I don't really understand why a pregnant wife had to be attacked rather than just Tommy himself, as though we can only understand a victim to be innocent if she's a pregnant woman. As a whole, Citadel is not without sympathy for the hoodie gang, existing only as a result of systemic abandonment, fear, and hatred, but it still sentences them to death. 3.5 stars.
Yeah, the movie, the ending really, especially after the big reveal, is like, okay, if it just ended differently, I feel like a lot of the stuff would make more sense. And even with Marie's death, she's very clearly supposed to be embodiment of people who do understand what the real problem is, but they also, not living there, don't understand that that's still a real threat.
I understand that. I just don't think she had to die for that.
Right, I agree.
I understand her being taken out of the narrative. Okay, put her in the hospital or something.
Yeah.
But I don't know, just...
She didn't have to die.
Yeah, killing her brutally like that just to get her out of the way. It just kind of was like...
Yeah.
I don't know. I had issues with Marie's death, and I had issues with, well, the answer is to just blow up the building with all of these kids in it.
And especially when you know that Danny was one of them and that they're...
So clearly they're not beyond...
saving.
Yeah, they're not beyond reach.
And
just like in real life, no one is beyond reach.
And so, but the idea of like, well, we'll just blow it all up anyway. And even when there's this justification for it, when the priest is like, well, we're just going to blow up the building. And he's just like, well, but I used to live there. And the priest is like, I was just waiting for them all to leave, all the last traces of humanity to leave, and now they're out, so we can just blow it up. It's like, well, see, nobody's gonna get hurt. Like, we've narratively made sure all the good people are gone.
Yeah, and all the good poor people. It's just, you know, I feel like it's just a little muddied. That's how I feel about it. I do think it's an outlier of most hoodie horror, excluding Attack the Block, which Attack the Block, it is in its own category. Attack the Block says everything that needs to be said about this genre, and they get it right on the head. So it's not at that level, but it is a bit of an outlier with the rest of the genre, which again, usually the protagonist, much more wealthy, not from the area that's affected, and you know that means something. Those stories all come from this very white upper class fear of urban working class people, when in reality they are not usually the victims of crime in these areas.
And I think the film does try to do that, where, you know, it's like, oh, well, why don't you call the police? And he's just like, the police don't come here. And the idea that they're able to proliferate in these types of housing because there's no help. Like, these are the victims that they can attack that nobody will care about.
It's a huge subversion, and I don't want to not give it credit where it's due.
It just muddies its message.
Yeah.
So
I did like it, though. I actually liked it more on rewatch than I liked on the first watch. On rewatch, I was like, you know what? Actually, this is pretty solid. The acting is very good. So good. And Urin, who I know he's, I don't know, the dream boat for a lot of people. This is the only thing I've seen him in. So, but I've seen that boy around. He really killed it in this. He carried it for sure. I mean, I loved Marie, but she wasn't in
a lot of it.
Yeah, tons. And he really gave it his all. I got it. I was like, no, I understand why he's being cast and all these things. If this is what he can bring to the table, I get it. I have never in my life seen a horror movie protagonist this neurotic and timid and frightened and prey-like and had it feel so real.
And the whole movie, the whole point being like, well, because you're afraid of them, they can see you. Just get over it.
Yeah. No, it really is. Like, I kept making the ERP joke because my sister has OCD, and we make the ERP joke all the time. Whenever she has to do anything hard, she's like, it's okay, it's ERP. It's ERP. Whenever I make her watch a horror movie, I'm like, it's ERP. Don't worry about it. So we make that joke all the time, and I kept making that joke, but it's so real. This whole movie really is this is ERP for him. He has to go through it and survive multiple times, and that's the only way that he can learn that no, he can survive. Actually, he doesn't have to be petrified of everything.
And even just the way that multiple people, from the group therapist and to the priest, just being like, the reason you're attacked is because you look like a victim. The reason you're attacked is because you look like a prey animal that's not going to fight back. Again, it's believable, and he does so well, and even portraying agoraphobia, which gets treated as a punchline so much, but the reality
is it's debilitating.
Yeah, of him like having to stare down.
I said debilitating. It's debilitating.
And him having to like stare down at the ground as he pushes the stroller. And there's a lot of children in the movies on this list, but I really like the choice where his daughter Elsa is constantly crying, and you can tell it's just adding to the stress. And him even saying that every time I hold her, she cries, and Marie tells him, she says, babies can sense fear. And the idea being she doesn't feel safe with you.
Yeah.
I know that you're a good father, but you to step up for her, you have to work through this.
Yeah, it was good. I liked it a lot.
I did love the moment where the priest is telling him all about how they're going to blow up the building, and he's just like, how do you know this will work? And the priest is just like, past life, it's not the first time I've done this. And it's like, okay, sir with a Belfast accent, how do you know how to blow up a building?
Where'd you get those homemade explosives, sir?
Why are you so good and confident at this?
Yeah. I mean, he's kind of a caricature of, like I said, he's hoodie horror personified. He's all the older generations that just have nothing but disdain for the youth of today.
Yeah.
And to have that juxtaposed with Tommy, who is a youth, he's very young. I believe Aneurin was 21 or something.
Yeah, they're clearly supposed to be a very young couple.
Yeah, he's very young. He's from this area. He is working class. He's a working class youth. Mm-hmm. And the priest started all of this by abandoning his lover, who she was an addict, who lived in this building, this old condemned desolate building, and she had given birth to twins from this priest, and he had abandoned all of them, and that's where this all stemmed from.
The fact that it's his fault.
Yeah, and to compare that with Tommy, who is facing genuinely his trauma, the personification of his trauma, to save his kid, and also this other kid that isn't even his, but he has now adopted, like, immediately.
Just comes along
the
for
father
the ride.
instinct just kicked in. I did like that. I liked that it was a young father of this generation who's stepping up to the plate, and that's sort of the cure.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Boys from County Hell from 2021 by Chris Baugh, who also directed a series. I don't know if he directed the whole series or just a few episodes or what. It's just listed on his credits, but now I kind of want to see it. It's set on a cruise ship, and a guy goes undercover on the cruise ship to investigate the disappearance of his sister.
Ooh.
And it looks very fun. A crew of hardy road workers, led by a bickering father and son, must survive the night when they accidentally awaken an ancient Irish vampire. There's a line at the very, very beginning of the film where the main character, Eugene, says, "Hardly anyone even knows Bram Stoker was Irish," which I think really just sums things up. Truly, this film is such a delightful reminder that Ireland has always had skin in the horror game, down to the ancient mythology. More horror than comedy, but its humor is done well, and I laughed my way through most of it. The dig at American Werewolf in London was great, and I loved that the story centered on the locals rather than some foreign tourists. Louisa Harland, Orla from Derry Girls, and John Kindest Face Award Lynch were a delight to see. Watched this one with my friend I've been slowly pushing into horror, and she had a good time. This is a perfect example of how I want my horror comedies to handle the blend of both. 4.5 stars.
This was really excellent.
I loved this one.
And I guess I was expecting it to be not more campy, because it is very tongue-in-cheek, but it's very, very well done, very competently done. I knew nothing about it, and then at the very beginning I was like, oh, okay, it's about vampires. And then there's the bar that's called The Stoker, and I was like, oh, haha, thinking that was just going to be like a throwaway. But no, it's all about it. Like, it takes place in the 6 Mile Hill, which is evidently where Bram Stoker got the inspiration.
Well, it's not a real place.
No, it isn't. I mean, in the context of the film.
Yeah.
That the idea is Bram Stoker came here, heard this legend about the town, about seeing this cairn where evidently this old vampire was buried, and then he goes on to write Dracula. And the town is banking on that. Like, they make money off of the tourists who come here to see the cairn, and they have the one bar in town that's themed after it. And I also think it has such a great way of, when you live in a tourist area like that, how you hate the tourists, but also you do need the money from them.
Yeah.
Where part of the tension is that they're going to put a bypass through the town, and they're going to destroy the cairn. And when the locals hear about it, they're pissed, because they're like, that's the only reason tourists come here. You're taking away like the one thing that really makes us money.
So there's some superstition attached.
Right.
Not everybody believes that there is an ancient vampire under there, but
you don't mess with
Yeah,
things.
most people are like, don't mess mess with it. Don't mess with it. Come on.
Right, but I like the acknowledgement of that, being in a tourist town. And that tension with it. No, this was really, really good. It balanced the comedy really well with the horror. There's a lot of scenes that are genuinely heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Especially when you see the main character, Eugene's friend, turned into a vampire.
His childhood best friend.
And I think that actor was really good.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing is, they really sell that. They really sell that these people have known each other their whole lives. I mean, this is a town where everyone has known everyone their whole lives.
And even the way that, they argue and whatever, you can tell there's still a sense of community at the end of the day, where it's like, even if they don't really like someone or whatever, they're still part of the community.
We're still on the same team.
Yeah.
We just don't like each other much.
No, this is really, really solid. I love that Abertac looked like a bog body.
I know. The creature design of Abertac killed me. Because, I've read a lot of the Irish mythology. But what's interesting about that is when you're reading it in English, a lot of these myths use the word that's translated in English to dwarf to refer to usually if it's an evil type of, creature or fair folk or anything like that, they just use the word for dwarf. So when you're reading it in English, you're just kind of like, oh, so they're super small. And then sometimes they'll describe the height of the creature and it'll be like, it was 9 feet. It's like, that's a dwarf? In what world? But it's just because that word, that's just how it ended up translated. But I was thinking about the Abertac legend that I read where he's described as a dwarf, and then I see this tall creature, and I was like, oh, that's right. It doesn't mean what I think it means.
And that's what's even interesting when you read the more traditional German fairy tales, where the word for really any elf or supernatural creature is just dwarf or dwarves. And so again, you're thinking in your head, oh, they're just really
very
small.
Similar, yeah.
And then it's like, no, it's just
like,
some guy.
No, that's just the Tolkien influence. Divorce it from your mind. Divorce Tolkien from this.
Take him out of the equation.
Yeah.
But yeah, even the way that when William dies, everyone blames Eugene, including himself. And you can tell that it's because he's the really easy scapegoat of the town.
He's the local burnout. He's not doing anything.
Yeah. And his family are the ones that are doing the road work.
The bypass that's going to kill the tourism in the town. And William also was the golden child.
Yeah, he was
the soccer star.
Yep.
He was going places.
Yep, he went to university.
Yeah.
And, he was going to move out and go to Australia.
Yeah,
he
was the golden child for sure compared to Eugene. And so Eugene just kind of lets himself be scapegoated because he also has, survivor guilt because that was his childhood best friend who he saw die.
Even though, like you said, it was William's idea.
It was William's fault. All of it was William's fault.
It was his idea to go to the bar for a drink. It was his idea to cut through the field. He's the one that started the physical fight.
The fist fight with Eugene, who... This clearly has happened before because Eugene's first response when William hits him is, man, this again, every time you get fucking drunk.
Yeah.
So that clearly is a problem of William's. I love that even because it does feel like such a childhood friend thing where, yeah, you're literally in a fist fight, but you're not going hard or anything.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of annoyed about it.
And William gets gored on the cairn, and it's not their fault the bull cut out.
Which their mutual friend points out. He's like, it's not your fault that William's dad couldn't control his bull.
Yeah, and they even warn tourists about going wandering into people's fields. It's not that anybody's really going to stop you, but you don't know where a bull's going to be. And again, coming from farm people where it's you don't mess with that.
No, it's so true. I ended up in a field one time as a kid where there was a bull, and me and my cousins were freaking out because we were 7 or 8 or whatever. But he was so nice. He came right up to us. He was just kind of curious, and he let us pet him. And then we backed out very slowly and climbed the fence again and left. And I was telling my dad about that. And he was like, yeah, he's been gelded. And I was like, what does that mean? He's like, don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. I was literally thinking,
yeah.
My mom has a story of when she was a child, the bull, her family farm, the bull Jasper jumped the fence, and she wound up in the bed of a truck as this bull is trying to gore her and get at her. And her grandfather was like, you know, with his walker in the door, just like, get in the house! And she's like in the truck bed like, fuck no, I'm not jumping down. And it wasn't until other family members came out and grabbed him by the chain of his nose ring and led him back. And my mom tells the story very well. And my favorite thing about it, though, is that after she tells the story, it was hugely traumatizing of like this bull almost goring her, jumped clear of the fence. She didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
She just went out to throw corn husks in like she was told to do, and, you know, barely survived. And she tells it and she pauses and she goes, but he sure tasted good.
Got your revenge.
That's farm living, baby.
Yeah, it sure is. Anyway, that's Boys from County Hell, I guess. That was just us talking about farm living.
No, but that's what I think we really...
It is what it's about.
It is what it's about. And the sense of community from it. And even though you kind of can tell where twist, quote unquote, is going to be, where it turns out that, oh, Eugene's mom are descendants of the chieftain that put Abertac down, it pays off. It works. Mm-hmm. It's a good movie. It's
a good movie. I
was trying to think of another way to say something we didn't already say, but no, it balances the humor with really serious moments.
He's got no fangs. He's not a vampire. As he's climbing up the pole that has cored through his chest and knocked out his heart.
He's mad drunk.
Okay, dude. Maybe he's on drugs. God.
I did the coke once. Didn't feel the 4 fights I got into.
I loved it. And
even the deaths did really hit you, like SP's death.
SP's death, William's death. Very fun. I did think it was kind of funny that they built up Abertac and how difficult he'd be and all of this stuff. And yeah, he doesn't die easy, but they don't really fight him for very long. Eugene kind of just takes him out.
His stronger stuff come.
Yeah. Eugene just kind of takes him out and buries him in a very shallow grave compared to their security guard, who's this elderly alcoholic man.
Well, and even that's funny is when, you know, Abertac comes back and they're just like, well, people put him down the first time and they didn't even have electricity.
Yeah. That's true. I mean, that's a good point. Clearly, he's not that hard to take down.
I mean, think about what it takes to make tools back then, and now they're a road crew, so they have all this shit just handy.
Yeah. I feel like William gave them more trouble than Abertac. But I think maybe the idea was, well, he's been underground for centuries. He can't be that strong.
I love that he looked like a bog body.
Yeah. The design was really great. And also the gag of Eugene calls the local, he's a cop, but I don't know what he's called because he's like a different kind. But he calls him to try to get him to
do something
about Abertac. But they can't say, oh, it's an ancient vampire because no one would believe them. So he just says, there's someone acting suspicious around the town. Can you check it out? And the guy's like, yeah. What's he look like? And Eugene doesn't know what to say because, again, he can't say, well, he's an ancient bog body vampire.
It's Abertac come back.
Yeah. So he says, well, he's tall. He's got dark skin.
And there's a long pause.
Oh, it's so funny. All of his friends immediately are just like, God, that's the worst thing
just
you could have said. And the cop's face is just like, I can't believe someone is saying this to me right now. And he goes, that's not a crime, Eugene. We're a very kind and welcoming community. It's so good. It's
Eugene's
so
just like,
good.
Forget it. Just check it out.
It's so good. Oh, man. Anyway, 4.5 stars. Loved it.
This was the last movie we watched, but it featured a bunch of actors we had seen and a lot of these other ones.
the other ones. Oh, it was
so
great.
It was like, oh, it's that guy.
Yeah. Old friends. Alongside our old friend, the Irish Film Board.
We're going to see that logo is just imprinted on the back of our eyelids now.
Oh, man. That logo sponsors my dreams now.
Friend of the pod, the Irish Film Board.
Truly. Okay, next we have Grabbers by John Wright from 2012.
This would make a really perfect double feature with Boys from County Hell.
I agree. Having watched them back to back with Elise, they do make a good double feature. John Wright also directed Unwelcome, which was a 2023 movie that I watched on my own.
Unfortunately.
Anyway, Grabbers. When an island off the coast of Ireland is invaded by blood-sucking aliens, the heroes discover that getting drunk is the only way to survive. Extremely funny hearing this very English actor say crack. fun horror comedy. More comedy than horror, in line with Gremlins. The baby grabbers were even cute like the Mogwais. Every single bit player was hilarious, from local drunk Patty, played by Layla Roddy, who appears multiple times on this list, to busybody matchmaker Una, played by Brona Gallagher from The Personal History of David Copperfield, to posh marine ecologist Smith, played by Russell Tovey, aka the werewolf in Being Human. The romance angle felt a bit forced, given that they've known each other for 2 days, and O'Shea has been a drunken jerk for most of that time, but whatever. On rewatch, I've decided I've come around to the romance angle, on account of it essentially being a big city, uptight, workaholic girl meets small town slacker who needs to shape up Hallmark movie that's actually a creature feature horror, so I enjoy thinking of beach read moms getting suckered in by that. Overall, an enjoyable romp, and the Schlancha line killed me. 4 stars.
It was great. Crack.
Oh my god, this man. He was doing pretty well. Up until that moment, and every time he said crack, and he said it like
3 times.
3 times back to back, and every single time he goes, crack.
He says that it'll be... Because they're trying to get people to shelter in place at the inn, or at the tavern, and he's like, it'll be good, crack. And we burst out laughing, and then later he's just like...
crack.
Yes, he lengthened it. It was so funny. And we were just like, they didn't do a second take because everyone thought that was too funny.
They had to have thought that was funny. Like,
they were just like, nope, that's staying in.
Why have him say it 3 times?
I really, really like this movie. This leans more into kind of what I thought Boys from County Hell was going to be. Very campy.
Very cheesy, very fun.
And not as, dry kind of tongue-in-cheek that Boys from County Hell is. No, it's great. I really loved it. That actor who plays Patty, it was so fun. This was the next thing I saw him in after being Father Thomas in this very serious horror movie.
Yes.
And it's like, I'm glad he gets to have fun roles.
Yeah, oh my god. And I mentioned this while we were watching it, because obviously, because of the basis of this film and the plot and everything, a lot of these people have to act drunk.
Yeah.
Because they're all supposed to be drunk. And most of them do okay. The leading actress, I don't remember her name, sorry lady, she doesn't do great with acting drunk. She does her best, and it's okay. It's not the worst drunk acting I've ever seen, but it's what it is. Patty aced it, and I have heard before from actors that a testament of good acting is if you can act drunk, because a lot of people just oversell it.
Yeah,
and that's where it becomes not that great.
No.
But Patty, I fully believed. I was like, yeah, this is a walking, talking, just keg stand of a man. He is just always in the sauce.
Just always sloshed. And the CGI is obviously CGI, but
yeah, but it's fun.
Fine.
It's fun. It's really fun. This is one of those times where I'm just like, CGI can be really fun.
Yeah, and I love the way they made the male creature move, where it's all this massive tentacles and a mouth, but it rolls. It doesn't slither. It just rolls down, which almost makes it more of a threat because it's fast.
Yeah, it looks like a giant wheel of cheese.
Sure.
Well, okay, so in the fantastic sci-fi channel show Z Nation, there is an episode where our survivors take out a horde of zombies by releasing a giant wheel of cheese that's somewhere in Wisconsin or something. And it rolls down the hill and sucks all these zombies into it. And so their legs are kicking out of the rind and the sides. And it because of their legs kind of kicking, it genuinely looks like this creature.
Okay.
So that's all I was thinking of when I saw it rolling.
But there's an explanation. Okay.
Yeah. There's context. Watch Z Nation.
This is the movie you show to someone who doesn't like horror.
Yeah. Like my friend Elise, who I did show Grabbers, and she really enjoyed it. She also enjoyed Boys from County Hell.
I did kind of hope that Patty would be the final girl. Everyone else is dead except Patty.
Patty kept having final girl moments, and we were rooting for him. Patty as final girl.
He's just like, if something goes down, all right, I'll see you later.
More horror filmmakers need to have the courage to make their final girl an elderly drunk man.
And especially because he's the one that he catches the female grabber in a lobster trap. He takes it home and puts it in his bathtub with water.
Yeah. I think he gets a sea monster.
Yeah. And
he does think it's dangerous.
And he's just like, do you think we could sell it on the eBay? How much money can we get for it?
He's so ready. And the ecologist is just like, you're not selling it. God, is it a wonder why she bit you? He just has no time for Patty. I will say, I enjoyed all of the characters.
Yeah.
Every single side character in this film was a joy. They were just so fun together.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's a comedy where there's not always like fully a straight man, where everyone gets to have a turn being ridiculous.
Lisa obviously starts out as the straight man, but she spends the whole end third of the film
drunk,
plastered, so she's having her own silly moments.
But even she has a moment where, you know, they're getting ready to go onto the scene where there's these whales washed up, and she's very strict with O'Shea, and she's just like, and I want you to introduce me as Garda Norton. It's very important to me that you do that. And he's like, nobody gives a crap. What? Fine, whatever. And as soon as she sees the posh ecologist, she's immediately just like, hi, Lisa. And
yeah, and O'Shea's face at that too is delightful.
And that's what I mean, where it's like everyone's allowed to kind of. And I love Una, where she's just
oh my god, I love Una.
She's this busybody.
She's clearly just this busybody matchmaker. You know those older married women that are just like, everyone else should be married too. So she sniffs out that you're single. Oh, she's got a person for you, baby.
And even when they're, you know, they've got this grabber in the back of the tavern and they're trying to keep her out, and they're just like, we can't tell you. And she's just like, Alza does this big wig. He's like, oh, okay. And gets excited. And her husband is just like, her birthday's next week. She thinks this is for her. And he's so clearly mad because now he has to do something for her.
It's so funny.
It'll be great. Crack.
Oh my god.
It sounds like text to speech.
I know. All their interactions were so good. Even in the beginning, Patty and the barkeep just sniping at each other. Yeah. And Patty starts insulting the beer there, and the barkeep, or he starts saying, if this wasn't the only pub on this stupid island, I wouldn't even come here. And the barkeep goes, fine, you're barred. And Patty's like, oh no, I'm just
sure I'm joking. Give us another round.
It was so good. It's like, yeah, these people know each other.
O'Shea is played by the guy
Father Blackburn.
Yes,
from
Chilling Adventures of Sabrina.
Adventures of Sabrina.
So it was fun to see him in a like.
He's like an evil man, and then O'Shea is just kind of he's an alcoholic and you know all that, but he's just kind of a guy.
And the idea that he's this bumbling character in a comedy.
Yeah, and he gets to have his little romance as well.
You know, as much as I love hearing a beautiful drunk slurring her affections for me. And even the way that they're sniping at each other, this is the modern fairy tale of New York.
Yeah. It did, honestly, it truly did feel like a Hallmark movie. Like, they were in a Hallmark romance movie that just kind of got interrupted by aliens.
For the movie being more campy and subverting, where Una tells Lisa that, oh, you know, O'Shea, he's a widower, and oh, it's so sad. And when she says, you know, I heard about your wife, and he's like, death, and he's like, she didn't die, she just met someone else, like, she just left me. And he's not even really mad about it. He's like, it happens. He doesn't
seem that bitter, but, I mean, he's clearly not dealing with it well, because he's turned to the bottle.
But he's not like,
he's not bitter.
Bitch was cheating on me,
and that was refreshing as well. I feel like that's such a common, even in real life, as soon as a man starts talking about his bitch of an ex-wife, I'm just kind of like, all right, I don't trust you. Not to say that there aren't ex-wives that are bitches, but it just happens too often. I'm just like, not all of you can be innocent. So next up we have You Are Not My Mother by Kate Dolan from 2021, I believe, or 2022. I didn't write the year down for this. Whoops. In a North Dublin housing estate, Char's mother goes missing. When she returns, Char is determined to uncover the truth of her disappearance and unearth the dark secrets of her family. Breathtakingly good. Incredibly tense family drama that rings very close to home for me as someone with a bipolar parent whose actions at times were incredibly scary. As a bipolar person myself, changeling myths have always felt close to the bone. There are times when how I act is antithetical to my quote-unquote normal, and it would not be amiss for someone who knows me to find me unrecognizable. While Angela's exact condition is never verbalized in the film, her prescribed medications, symptoms, and the way they're described really reads as bipolar or something similar. And the desperate sense of uselessness within her family feels familiar as well. I loved everything about the film, but especially the acting, from the eerie body movements of Angela, played by Carolyn Bracken, to the expressive mannerisms of Char, played by Hazel Duke, to even the glimpses of complicated humanity within the bullies. In another film, Angela is not a changeling, and it's simply a coming-of-age drama about a girl dealing with her mother's mental illness while developing a relationship with her bully-turned-BFF Suzanne. But I liked the changeling aspect so much. The acknowledgement that even if she was right, Rita setting any version of infant Char in a fire was horrific. That this mother was the one who took Char years ago and never gave up the possibility of getting her back, and Char, who just wants her mother to be her mother. Dolan clearly drew a lot from her own childhood growing up with stories of Irish mythology from her grandmother, in the very area where the film is set. I also just love the fact that her editor is her best friend, who she brought onto the project despite the studio's reticence given he'd never edited a feature film, and that in their spare time they always watch horror movies together. It genuinely feels like a professional, crisp labor of love. 5 stars.
Yeah, this movie was excellent.
It was excellent.
And the thing that I really like about it is that her mom already kind of had problems. It wasn't like, oh, her mom was normal and then started exhibiting these mental illness symptoms.
Yeah.
And so that's why they don't necessarily take it as seriously. Well,
and also
Rita clocks it.
She just got put on medication.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, I know from experience that can change your personality or what people know as your personality. So, yeah, it makes sense to me that none of them except Rita, who doesn't believe in modern medication anyway. Even the uncle, when he first gets her meds, he's like, yeah, your mom's going to be on these, so she might be funny for a while.
Yeah.
Because that's a known, understood thing
and
that they were prepared for.
And even for the mother, even though Rita was right and it was a changeling that she got Char back, that's still horrific. And she's the one that lost Char in the first place.
Yeah.
She went out for a walk with her in the buggy and just lost her. And the sense of guilt.
And couldn't remember. Which also tells us that, okay, these sort of problems have been going on for a long time then.
And even the way that Rita talks about it, that very specific family way where you don't like directly say it, where she's like, you know, it was really hard. She was so young when you were born. And even though you were a really good baby, you were always very happy. It was hard on her.
Yeah.
So
I thought it was just extremely well done in every aspect. I was really blown away. I loved the creature design for this changeling and how it can't keep the facade of the human it's impersonating. It starts to change back into its natural form.
And that's why it's so insistent on, no, we're going to go away for the weekend with Char. What seems like a manic episode.
Yeah.
But it's really just this changeling's desperation of, I can't keep this up.
Yeah. Her teeth start falling out. Her hair starts falling out. Even in the beginning, kind of get the sense with the vomiting scene, maybe she can't process human food.
Nope.
Which I liked that detail, if that's the case, because food in the human world versus the fairy world is a very big deal.
Yes.
And so I like the idea that the Fae just can't handle human food.
And the reason why Rita immediately dumps out what the changeling had been cooking.
Right.
And so it's like, well, we are getting takeout anyway.
Yeah.
And I also just really want to praise the performance of Char's actress. Like, this is it's a test of a good actor if you can act drunk. I think it's a test of a good actor if you can carry scenes with no dialogue.
Yeah.
Where nothing is really happening. You just see the emotions.
It's just the face.
And she's so good at that, and you completely understand this girl who's very quiet, very withdrawn, and she comes from a really tense household, and it really captured that feeling of being in a tense household where you're just trying to act normal.
Yeah.
And you're trying not to trigger or upset family members.
But you also don't exactly know.
Yeah.
You're basically walking on eggshells because you don't know what the triggers are.
Yeah.
And the sense of overwhelm that comes with that, because it's very difficult to keep that up.
Yeah.
Also, I was reading an article with Kate Dolan about the making of this film, and she mentioned growing up hearing stories from her grandmother. Like, she was a little girl outside one day kicking over mushrooms, just kind of the way that you do as a kid, because they're fun to like squash. And her grandmother came out and was like, "What are you doing? That's a fairy ring. If you keep doing that, the fairies are going to get you," and stuff like that. And it was so funny reading that, because I literally have a memory that's almost exactly that, but with my mother, where I was stomping on mushrooms, because they were the kind where if you stomp on them, smoke comes out. Yeah. And my mother came running up and she was like, "Stop doing that. What are you doing? If you do that, she said brownies, but she was like, the brownies are going to come in and they're going to shave all your hair off." And I was like, oh my God, okay.
That's what sells it. She got specific.
I know. And it was just so funny reading that because I'm like, yeah, I totally relate. I know exactly what you're describing.
And even the uncle, who's clearly knows that he's the working adult in the family, and him trying to keep everything together. And when Char's mom goes missing, and he's asking Char, like, well, did she say anything on the car ride to school? And Char says, she said, I can't keep doing this. And the look on his face, where he's just like, oh no, she's dead. She's killed herself.
No, you see in his face just this kind of grief and understanding that his sister has probably killed herself.
And then he's
going to have to take care of her daughter now.
And then him immediately trying to cover it and be like, all right, well, she'll probably be back home by the time we get there.
Keeping the hope alive.
And clearly Char also is on that same page with him.
Yeah.
No,
she's gone.
She's gone.
Yeah. I really enjoyed this film.
And it also it's just interesting that it's the mother that gets taken.
Yes. Yeah. Because again, in Changeling Myth, listen, if you have any level of psychosis, Changeling Myth feel so real. And especially if you have a parent who has something like this. Yeah. Do I know my mom? Would I recognize that my mom is different? Is not her, Because there were days where she was just a complete stranger. And I don't know. Well, how am I supposed to know that it's not just her brain?
Yeah. And the film doesn't do what I think a worse film would be, that, oh, the changeling was this perfect mom. And then there's the conflict or whatever of like, well, do I want my real mother back who is crazy and stays in bed all day and she can't properly drive me to school and da-da-da, and this imposter who is acting like a mom.
Yeah.
But again, I think that would have been a worse film.
Yeah. And I mean, you do see glimpses of that. And I like that when her mom comes down in the dress and she's cooking, and Char's just excited to see her up.
Yeah.
And obviously she clocks that, oh, her mom's acting differently, but it's a positive differently.
Yeah.
And so she's just happy about it. Even though Rita, her grandmother, sees it as a sign of treachery afoot, Char just sees her mom being around and doing stuff, and she's just excited to see that.
I wonder if, because the changeling can put on glamours and whatnot, if Suzanne and Rita are not taken in, they're immune to it. Rita immediately sees it and knows it's a changeling. And because when the changeling is making that stew for the first time, both Char and her uncle are like, wow, that smells really good. What are you cooking? But when Suzanne visits and sees the same soup, she's like, oh God, that's nasty. So I don't, it just makes me wonder if...
Yeah, that's a good point.
Also, Suzanne's mother died by drowning, and
when she was very little.
Very little. And her ghost appears to tell Suzanne, get out of the house.
Like immediately. That her mom's ghost is on it. And she had said earlier she did feel like her mom was watching over her.
Yeah.
And so we see that is the case, actually. And I liked that. I don't know. There were just so many things about this film. It wove real things like mental illness and family secrets and family tensions with supernatural goings on so deftly. I loved it.
Yeah.
It's rare for me to find a film that I feel does the concept 100% justice, and I think this film does.
I agree. It's just a well-made film. The scene where the changeling is finally just trying to run and grab Char, and it screams, but the sound cuts, and instead it's the firework behind it. Wow, this is the competently made movie. I love when things are good.
It's very good. Highly recommend. If you only watch one changeling film on this list, I think it should be this one.
Oh, yes.
Next, we have The Lodgers.
Is The Lodgers the last one?
It is.
Why did you save that one for last? This is God.
Next, we have The Lodgers from... What fucking year was this? From 2017 by Brian O'Malley, who also directed Let Us Pray, which is a Scottish slasher. It's what it is. A family curse confines orphaned twins Rachel and Edward to their home in punishment for their ancestors' sins. Bound to the rules of a haunting childhood lullaby, the twins must never let any outsiders inside the house. What could have been an interesting gothic horror story about children of incest being haunted by the crimes of their parents is unfortunately bogged down by a shallow script, cheap special effects and middling acting. I'm not as down on CGI as a lot of horror fans. I think it can be fine and even good, but the CGI in this just ain't it. And not to nitpick, but how come the sons of incest always look like frail waifs on the doorstep of consumption, but the daughters are always beautiful? Just give them both the jaundiced look. Also, what did they even get from the lodgers? How exactly were they keeping them safe or taking care of them? If they at least paid the bills and kept the house in shape, it would make sense for them to question leaving. But all they get for their trauma and isolation is more waterlogged trauma and a bad lullaby as their house falls apart around them. Girl, just leave. Skip this and watch Crimson Peak or read Flowers in the Attic instead. 1 star.
Yeah, this movie sucked.
This movie sucked.
So this is a movie where the dialogue is really bad, and it's very clear that the writer for each scene is just writing what they thought would be impactful for that scene without a real thought to the overall story. There's one line reading in particular that just stuck out to me as so obviously wrong, where the love interest is like, nobody's cursed to die, and she answers, our curse is to live.
Yeah.
Like, it would have been so much more impactful if she just looked at him and said, we're not cursed to die, and just left it hanging. I don't know. You don't have to babysit your audience through it. And also, the acting in period pieces with different vernacular is very difficult. Again, a test of a good actor. Willem Dafoe in The Lighthouse did an amazing job, where he's talking in a very clearly old style of English, but it feels very natural. This thing felt like we are actors in a period piece. Sister, you know the laws by which we are governed. Oh my god, terrible. Just from the first
it was real bad.
Scene.
Dialogue truly held this movie back by so much.
And it also has an issue where you understand where it's going. Like, it's not a very difficult story, and it doesn't have to be. It can be a very simple plotline and story, but it's so vague where, like you said, there's no real understanding of, okay, what exactly happens if they come out? What are the actual stakes and consequences? And also, what do they get out of it?
What do they get out of this? That was the thing that kept me questioning this whole movie.
They're literally about to get kicked out.
Because they talk about, oh, they take care of, like, Edward is constantly saying, oh, they take care of us, oh, they protect us. From what? Because it doesn't look to me like they're doing much of anything.
No. And even talking about it, the better version of this movie is a commentary on, because it takes place in the 20s, right after World War I, is a commentary on aristocratic families resisting a new world, resisting losing their wealth, resisting
losing their blue
status,
blood,
and the idea that
they don't want to mix breeds.
Right, where this entity is the embodiment of that, and it's forcing these two children to have children together because there's no other suitors. And that gives more weight to not letting Rachel leave because you have to stay.
It was very frustrating because I am not opposed to the bare bones conceit of this film. I think there could be something there about the crimes of these incestuous ancestors manifesting as this creature that haunts these children of incest. I think that could be a really, really interesting
And even the
story.
idea that they always look the same. They've been cursed to be. So when Rachel sees flashbacks or you see pictures of their parents, they look just like them.
Yeah, and so I think that could be a really interesting, well-done story by someone who cared.
Yeah, by something better. And like there's flashes of it where they're living in this dilapidated house. They have no money, and yet Rachel still looks down on the shopkeeper.
Common people.
Right.
The peasants. Yeah.
And when she's having this flirtation with her love interest, the son of good store owner, her brother's just like, oh, you're some peasant's whore. He gets really angry about that.
There's clearly something here about class, and it just never goes anywhere. It's just frustrating because, again, this could be a really well done, interesting story by someone who cared, by someone who wanted to say something about class and incest and the trauma of that. But it just felt like this guy, he watched Crimson Peak.
Just going off of vibes,
read
baby.
A couple of gothic horror stories. Incest is kind of a running motif in a lot of those. And he just said, okay, I know what will make a gothic story. Incest. And he just didn't care. He just didn't care about what story he was telling. He just wanted to make a gothic horror movie.
It's like the film version of a Tumblr mood board for
a
gothic story. One detail that I did like was that Edward never leaves the house.
Yes, and he blends into the house. And that was visually interesting.
And he is pale. He looks like someone who has not left the house in however many years. Rachel has some actual color to her because she's the one that goes down into town and whatnot. I was like, okay, well, that's fine. And unlike Char's actor and You Are Not My Mother, this actress just cannot carry scenes where it's just her face emoting.
Yeah.
As we discussed while watching it, this isn't really a knock against her, but this movie might be more passable if there were better actors in it, actors who could carry the dead weight of the script.
Yeah.
None of the actors in this movie are up to that task.
No. I told Wolfgang this. I've seen her in other things. I saw her in the Wrong Turn movie. She was good in that. But that's because I had a good script. So you either get a cast that can compensate for your bad script or you give them a good script.
Yeah. And again, it's just so frustrating. This is a very competently made movie. It's a movie with a very clear budget. And I can see what this movie should have been.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so frustrating. And the ending being so stupid.
It was just bad. It was just bad. And it's frustrating because there were glimpses. Another frustration that I had was at the very beginning, it's their 18th birthday. And Edward looks devastated. I mean, he just seems devastated. He's like, there's no leaving for us now. Like, he does not seem like he's into the whole plan of getting with his sister and continuing on the family line and the family curse.
And he's literally like, there's nothing to be happy about.
Right. He clearly doesn't want to do that. And then the whole rest of the movie, he's trying to get her to get into that idea. And it just seems kind of out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I really wish that as they had made him, because a few moments where I was like, okay, this is interesting, where they did things like made him visually blend into the walls of the house so you couldn't see him at first. And then he would step and move and you could see him. But I liked that idea of, because he never leaves the house, he's being swallowed by it.
Yeah.
And I wish that they had communicated that better in tandem with, as he's being swallowed up by this house and the curse within the house and everything that it represents, that's when he starts being kind of possessed by this curse. And that's when his mood sways on, oh, actually, I think this is great. We should just fuck and make new twins.
There's no getting out of it.
Yeah.
Like,
I wish they had just communicated that better, because it really felt kind of stupid that in the very beginning, he seems just devastated by this and so reticent. And I liked that. I liked the idea of them both not wanting this at all, but not seeing an escape from it.
Yeah.
Versus him just being rapey towards his sister.
Yep. And again, the fact that the house is falling apart and they have no money, their money is literally completely gone, you're taking away some of the tension of it, because now the issue is they're literally going to get kicked out of their house. It doesn't matter whether they want to leave or not. And they're just like, no, they'll never let us leave. And it's like, no,
like, what do you see happening?
Like, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah.
And again, I feel like if this was about class, and it's just delusion of, we've been here for centuries, you can't take us. And again, glimpses of a better movie where when the solicitor comes and is like, I have to come here in person because holy shit, you guys are out of money. We need to start selling off things, do something. He says, maybe it's time for you to return to London. And they're just like, well, we're not British. And he goes, not by birth, but
in the ways that matter.
In the ways that matter, you are. And they're living in the Irish countryside.
Yeah.
And part of the thing is that the townspeople don't like them because they know what's up. And her love interest ends up getting beaten and attacked by some of the local men because he went and fought for the English in World War I.
Mm-hmm. So they call him a traitor.
Again, this movie could have been
glimpses
good.
Of what it could have been.
Yeah. Glimpses of a better film.
Yeah, 1 star. Don't watch it. Go watch Crimson Peak.
And literally, her walking backwards 30 feet.
Oh
literally,
it was so stupid.
When the door is jammed, literally all she had to do was just turn and walk into it. And that idea of...
Well, she's just giving up.
She's giving up. Her brother's dead. Yeah. There's no escape for her. She's just giving up. No, they really thought they were writing a tragic, gothic romance.
Yeah, and it's just, well, where's the romance? Oh, not here. Well, where's the gothic? No. And
the romance is whatever.
Yeah, it's
there's
just
no chemistry in between.
There's no chemistry. He's barely a person.
Yeah.
I don't know. Not a good film. She's annoying as shit.
Yeah.
So, whatever. 1 star. I'm not going to talk about the extra ones I watched. Who cares? I will say I watched a couple more by Ivan Kavanagh, who did the Canal, because like Conor McMahon is sort of recognized as carrying the Irish horror comedy, Ivan Kavanagh is known for carrying the Irish psychological thriller / horror. So I watched a couple more of his films, and I enjoyed them. His latest film, Son, which is not very Irish at all, it's set in America, everyone's American, came out in 2021. I really enjoyed it. It was very good. Honestly, I kind of recommend both of his other films over The Canal. Tin Can Man was just kind of weird. That was his feature debut, I believe. It came out in 2007. It's in black and white. It truly does feel like David Lynch directed a Rob Zombie Firefly movie. So, I mean, it's interesting for that, if nothing else. Beyond that, I do kind of want to touch on Fangoria's coined term, éire horror, because, again, this is in comparison to terms like J-horror, or they also mention New Wave French extremism. Here's the thing. I don't like that term, éire horror, because the thing is, J-horror, while yes, it stands for Japanese horror, and there's a breadth of Japanese horror movies. There always have been. If someone says J-horror, they are almost always referring to a very specific brand of Japanese horror. And it's almost always supernatural. It's The Ring. It's The Grudge. It's Pulse.
Dark Water.
Yeah, Dark Water. Like, it's always something paranormal, usually involves a ghost, something like that. They're almost never talking about the kaiju movies. They're almost never talking about Battle Royale.
Godzilla's not on that list.
Yeah. So that's just kind of an understood thing. And then with New Wave French extremism, that's a very particular niche of French horror. That's high tension, it's raw,
it's meant to shock you.
Martyrs, and it's a very, very specific brand of film. And so éire horror doesn't really carry much weight when there's not really a niche that's specific to Irish horror. The closest I think we can come is the Changeling films. And so maybe those can be considered something like éire horror, if you want to call them that.
But throwing Dead Meat alongside You Are Not My Mother is like,
what are we doing? So I don't know. That's sort of where I land on that. I think Irish horror, like horror from every other country, is expansive and covers a lot of ground. There are different types, there are different subgenres, and it's worth checking out just to figure out what type you like.
Yeah.
So I think that's it. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.